Walnut, the 77th director of the Genshin funeral parlor, and she's here to put your enemies in the forever box.
Come with me. I'm Hu Tao, Wangsheng funeral parlor director. Let me help you cross over.
A self-proclaimed guardian of the border between life and death,
To sum it up, we are gatekeepers, guarding the border for the sake of both the living and the dead.
Hu Tao's kit revolves around sacrificing her hit points to boost her destructive power before healing back up again with her burst. But shoddy play will have you crossing over just a bit too often. Okay, fucking mines. Oh my god, we don't have the Zhongli shield. Alright, I need to heal. Holy fuck. Oh my god. Hu Tao's got a fairly standard 6 attack string. It's more similar to Xiao than Xiangling or Zhongli in the sense that it doesn't have an attack that hits lots of times. Attack 5 gives you 2 hits, but that's all you get. No Crescent Pike degeneracy here to be seen. Her standard attack string is fairly middle of the road in terms of how hard it hits, but Hu Tao's charged attack. Oof. Hu Tao's charged attack is the new heaviest hitting Polearm charged attack. It's not that flashy in terms of its standard appearance, but it hits for about 135% at base, whereas the next strongest is Xiangling's at 121%. Not too shabby. Walnut's skill, Guide to Afterlife, is where her flavor starts to kick in. By burning 30% of her current hit points, she activates the parameter Papilio state. In simple terms, she gains bonus attack based on her max hit points, infuses her attacks with Pyro, applies the damage over time marker to enemies she hits with her charge attack, and gains a bit of interruption resistance. Using this skill boils down to activating it and then spamming charged attacks like your life depends on it. And in a sense, it kinda does. Hu Tao applies Blood Blossoms with her charge attacks when her skill is active. Blood Blossoms deal damage over time, ticking every 4 seconds, and it's these ticks that generate energy for Hu Tao. With her buff lasting for 9 seconds and a cooldown of 16 seconds on the buff, it offers a tiny bit of downtime for you to prep the field with other skills from your party as well. For example, you can prep for gratuitous Vaporize reactions with Xingqiu and beef up Hu Tao with Zhongli's shield before resuming her fiery beatdown.
Let me show you some fire tricks.
With Hu Tao's first ascension, once her skill ends, she grants the rest of her party 12% crit rate for 8 seconds. This gives them a little damage bump during Hu Tao's downtime, so your field prep hits with just a little bit more oomph. With her fourth ascension, Hu Tao gains an extra 33% pyro damage bonus when her hit points are below 50%. If you take no damage from enemies and don't heal, it takes 2 casts of her skill to reach this point. Hu Tao gets 3 Constellations that interact with her skill's effects. Constellation 1 removes the stamina cost of her charged attacks during her skill, which is one of her big weaknesses. If you spend all of your stamina on charged attacks and leave none for dodging, you're often just a single strong hit away from death. Getting this Constellation is a big jump in damage. If you use the extra stamina to perfectly cancel your charged attacks with dashes, it's supposedly up to 30% extra damage over the popular jump cancel charged attack, though more realistically it's probably about 15% extra if you're not perfect with your execution. Those numbers aren't from my own theory crafting, but from Cleefall, another Genshin Impact content creator. Constellation 2 increases the damage of Hu Tao's Blood Blossoms by 10% of her max hit points, as well as causing her burst to apply the mark. Constellation 4 grants the rest of Hu Tao's party 12% crit rate for 15 seconds if a Blood Blossom marked enemy dies, giving just a bit of support to her supports. Wu-Tang's elemental burst is Spirit Soother. She straight up attempts to cremate the enemies around her, dealing pyro damage in a large AoE around her, as well as healing for a portion of her max hit points for each enemy hit, capping at 5 enemies. If you're at or below 50% hit points, the damage increases by another 25% and the healing increases by 33%. If you take no damage whatsoever, it takes 2 casts of Hu Tao's skill to reach 49% hit points for this bonus. The burst itself costs 60 energy and has a cooldown of 15 seconds, making it one that's middle of the road in terms of its requirements. All in all, this deals a big burst of damage and helps Hu Tao to sustain herself. Ideally, save this for the end of your skill window to benefit from its attack boost. As always, Constellations 2 and 5 grant 3 levels to Hu Tao's skill and burst, and Constellation 6 gives her a big burst in defensive stats and crit rate when her hit points reach critical levels or she takes a lethal strike, and she'll survive it instead. This is a last hurrah, and since it guarantees crits, it also opens her up to some meme builds that focus entirely on crit damage. Practical? Maybe. It's got a cooldown of 60 seconds between activations, so use this when making clickbait YouTube videos or manipulate it for huge 10-second damage spikes. In terms of her role overall, Hu Tao's pretty solidly seated as a main DPS, and because of this she's frequently compared to Diluc. The general consensus is that Hu Tao can do more DPS than Diluc, but is more focused around single target damage. Her downtime also actually brings her down a bit, and when it comes to a charged attack spam, it can get a bit unreliable if you're dealing with lots of small enemies, as the auto-targeting can cause you to fly around in undesirable directions. Jump cancelling the charged attacks can help you with positioning when you're flying through small enemies, but it does make for some pretty intense inputs, especially if you're playing on mobile, so your mileage may vary. More concrete analysis is still in the works when it comes to more theorycraft heavy content creators, but always keep in mind that you can't really compare characters in a vacuum. Support and backline preferences are all going to have an effect on the overall DPS of a character, and so between Diluc and Hu Tao it's going to turn into a team composition comparison rather than a 1-for-1. When it comes to character synergies, the most valued support is Xingqiu. Xingqiu's burst transforms Hu Tao's skill into a string of endless vaporize reactions, giving it a 1.5 times boost, or even more if you build Elemental Mastery on Hu Tao. Since Hu Tao prefers to remain at low hit points, this also means that shielding is a great way of keeping her alive. Zhongli is a preferred shielder due to his shield's immense girth, but I suppose other shielders such as Noelle, Diona and Xinyan could also suffice. In terms of builds, unsurprisingly Hu Tao's signature 5-star weapon, the Staff of Homar, is the most powerful on her. When it comes to 4-star weapons, the preferred 4-star weapon is typically the Dragon's Bane Polearm due to its Elemental Mastery stat when you're using it alongside Xingqiu. But the majority of the 4-star Polearms are pretty close in performance so long as you use them properly and build Hu Tao with their stats in mind. Hu Tao's most basic build uses the Crimson Witch 4-piece set for sustained DPS, with hit points or Elemental Mastery on her Sands, Pyro damage on her Goblet, and crit rate or crit damage on her Circlet. In terms of substance, you'll typically prioritize crit rate and crit damage, alongside hit points, Elemental Mastery, attack percent and energy recharge in that order. Overall, Hu Tao's another Pyro main DPS in Pyro Impact. If you're missing Diluc or Klee, Hu Tao could be a worthwhile addition to your party so long as you're happy to build her best friend Xingqiu. If you already have Diluc or Klee, however, pulling for Hu Tao is going to come down to some personal bias. If she's your waifu, then this video is probably 2 months too late to convince you not to pull for her. And that's about it. Thank you for watching this video until the end, take it easy, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time, when we figure out if Venti can suck a cork out of a bottle of dandelion wine.